We now move to question time, and I'm calling Senator Dean Smith.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Wong. Has the government modelled the impact of its decision to increase immigration by 715,000 people over the next 2 years on rental markets in Australia's capital cities?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks, Senator Smith, for the question. And I will, when I find the brief I was looking at before in relation to migration, I will respond directly on the NOM that he identifies. But if I may go to the rental point, it is odd to get a question about housing in a week where the Coalition and the Greens are going to work together to prevent investment in housing supply. Because if the new coalition, because if Senator Smith were concerned, as his question suggests he is, about rental affordability, he is somebody who I think understands basic supply and demand, and he would understand that if you increase supply, you put downward pressure on prices. So if one cares about rental affordability, how do you square that away, Senator Smith? How do you square that away with your opposition to more investment in the very infrastructure or the very capital investment that you say matters? Now, the reality is we have a higher net overseas migration forecast in 22-23 to reflect a one-off catch-up from the pandemic and the return of international students. And I know those opposite recognise the importance of that service, export service, to our economy and to the financial and broader position of our educational institutions. So I would have been surprised, in fact I have been surprised at Mr Dutton's position, which seems to suggest we don't want international students to return, which is of course an export earner for Australia, but at the same time opposing the Housing Australia Future Fund.
Senator Smith, first supplementary.
President, a supplementary question. How does the government reconcile its plan for increased immigration with the comments made by the Reserve Bank of Australia in this month's Statement on Monetary Policy that a shortfall in housing supply relative to strong demand from a rising population is expected to result in continued upward pressure on rents, adding to the inflation forecast?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Wong.
Well, I suppose the response to that might simply be, how do you reconcile your opposition to more investment in housing with the statement that you've just read out? I mean, it is utterly inconsistent. But I'll take, because Senator Smith and I, you've served here a long time together, I will take the less political aspect of his question, which goes to. Oh, sorry, have I done? Oh, no, now you're going to be in trouble, aren't you? I've said that. Which goes to the inflation point, and it is an important balancing act that the government has had to take through the budget as we look at how is it that you invest in support for cost of living, given the cost of living pressures that Australians are facing, without adding to inflation. And the Expenditure Review Committee and the Finance Minister and the Treasurer, as well as the Prime Minister, who chairs it, have been very focused on it.
Your time has expired. Senator Watt, I am going to remind you it is incredibly disorderly to call out when you're walking down to the Senate, and I would further ask you to withdraw the comments that you made. Thank you. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Isn't the government's decision to increase immigration to unprecedented levels just another example of the government's policies working against the Treasurer's statement that inflation remains the primary challenge in our economy?
Thank you, Senator Dean Smith. Senator Wong.
It's quite disappointing that those opposite who understand the backlog in terms of net overseas migration caused by the pandemic are going down this path. It is the case that we are seeing the return of international students. It's an important sector. I would remind the Senate that population is still forecast to be cumulatively lower than pre-pandemic forecasts by June 2023 and 215,000 persons lower in June 2024. So, in fact, whilst the net overseas migration figure is higher, the population forecast is in fact lower than was forecast previously. So I would counsel, obviously we understand the importance of making sure we have a sensible debate on migration. We've seen where this has gone at other times in this country. And what I would urge those opposite to recognise is that investment in housing is one of the ways we ensure that we assist in the battle against rising cost of living, that global
Senator
inflation
Wong. The time for
and
answering
supply
has
chain
expired.
constraints
Senator
have raised.
Stewart.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the government's budget will fix legacy issues Labor inherited from the Liberals and Nationals and address cost of living pressures?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. The Albanese government is committed to a stronger economy and a fairer society, and the budget will reflect that. We on this side have been working hard to clean up the mess left by Liberals and Nationals. They failed to manage the budget and they drove up debt. Tonight's budget will be a budget in the best Labor tradition, a budget focused on delivering cost of living relief now, including a $14.6 billion package of targeted relief for household energy relief, bill relief, cheaper medicines, expanding access to the parenting payment and more. Now, obviously, much more will be revealed tonight, but I can say that this budget will be delivered in the most responsible way so that it will not drive up inflation. We've also worked to ensure that this budget invests in the future growth of our economy with cleaner and cheaper energy at the core of that strategy, in sharp contrast to what those opposite delivered. Our budget is built on a foundation of responsible economic management, a stark contrast to those opposite. Right. Tonight's budget will include billions of dollars cleaning up the mess left to us by the Liberals and the Nationals. You see, unlike those opposite, Labor is not prepared to leave vital government functions unfunded, including biosecurity, disaster management, management of radioactive waste, digital health and online safety. Unlike those opposite, we're not happy to leave national collecting institutions to crumble or ignore Liberals' chronic underinvestment in our national parks or flood warning infrastructure. And of course, we had to address the previous government's failure to provision a single dollar for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Not a single dollar. So I'm hoping the Queenslanders might actually cheer a government that's backing in Queensland when it comes to the Olympics and Paralympic Games. And we, of course, are building on the $4.1 billion in the October budget we had to spend to resolve legacy issues.
Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you. Can Minister Wong please explain how the government is working to provide targeted, responsible cost of living relief without adding to inflation?
Senator Wong.
I thank Senator Stewart for her supplementary, and I would say this senator and all senators are very focused on cost of living relief for Australians in a way that is responsible and effective. So our priority is to provide cost of living relief without adding inflationary pressure to the economy. So we will include $14.6 billion in tonight's budget in responsible, targeted cost of living relief. And it builds on, and those opposite might remember this, they build on an increase to award wages, for aged care workers, improvements to paid parental leave and cheaper childcare. But as the Treasurer has flagged, it will forecast a surplus for this year, a deliberate result of the Albanese government's responsible bottom line. Now, but unlike those opposite, we will deal with this responsibly. We won't be wandering around like those opposite did with the back in black mugs. We will deal with this budget responsibly.
Order. Senator Wong. Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Stewart.
Thank you. Can the Minister provide further detail on Labor's continued responsible approach to budgeting, in contrast to the decade of waste and irresponsible spending from the Liberals and Nationals?
Senator Wong.
Well, I would make this point that because those opposite seem to live in some sort of fantasy land where they think they were responsible. Those opposite doubled the debt before the pandemic. Right. Those opposite left Australians with $1 trillion in debt, $1 trillion in debt, and nothing to show for it.
Order.
We on this side, this government will make decisions to reduce the. Oh, they don't like it, do they?
Senator Wong.
You don't like it.
Senator Wong.
It's very upsetting to know you're fiscally irresponsible.
Please resume
yes,
your
Senator.
seat. Order. I'm waiting for silence, and I'll call the minister again. Senator Wong.
Those opposite doubled the debt before the pandemic. They left us with $1 trillion in debt, nothing to show for it. What we will see in tonight's budget is more $17.8 billion in spending reprioritised, building on the $22 billion in savings and reprioritisation we identified in the October budget. Guess what their savings were in their last budget? Zero. One thing I would also say, one of the things driving the improvement to revenue is, of course, improvement in wages, and we all know
you, Senator
those
Wong.
opposite are for a low-wage economy.
Has expired. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Wong. Minister, is it accurate that most working Australian families will receive no energy bill relief in this budget, but will still be hit with the costs of higher inflation and an increased tax bill caused by bracket creep?
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Order on my right. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President, and I thank the senator for her question. And I would make this point. Obviously, details of the energy price relief plan, which required bilateral discussions with all states and territories, will be demonstrated and detailed in tonight's budget. But it does seem strange, just like the housing question, that we get a question from a coalition senator about energy price relief after they voted against it. That's right. You voted against it. You voted against the plan that you're now asking questions about. You vote. It's because our policies weren't going to deliver, he says. Well, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it? You know, they come in here and they say, we're for energy price relief, sort of, but we're going to vote against it, and actually we've got nothing else on the table to deliver it. There's only one party here, one party of government that is absolutely clear about the responsibility and opportunity of government to deliver price relief to Australian families. We know that energy prices have risen less than they would have if you had been in government, and those opposite irresponsibly voted against price relief for Australian families. And we will ensure, between now and the next election, every time you raise energy prices, we remind everybody who is listening that you voted against it. All of you voted against it. You voted against it, and really, you should go out to the Australian people and you should apologise for your refusal to give some price relief to families who are struggling with higher prices. As always, you know, those opposite still too focused on the ideology, not on practical outcomes, and their only response to energy price increases was to try and hide it before the last election.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Order on my left. When you're asking a question and the minister responds, I expect there to be order, and that I shouldn't have to call order 3 or 4 times to get order. I'm asking you to respect the Senate. Senator Hughes, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, how many of these same families who are ineligible for Labor's energy bill relief will pay more income tax in 22-23 as a result of bracket creep and the low and middle income tax offset coming to an end?
Order on my right. Senator what? Senator.
You ended it.
So, order on my right. Order. Order on both sides. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. And I'm a little confused, and I have obviously been focused on Sudan and other issues, but Is the senator asking a question about a tax offset that they ended?
She is.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. From my recollection is the Lamito was in fact, the ending of that was in fact flagged by your government. So if you're now going to fund that, I look forward to a budget reply which tells Australians how you will fund that. Well, you know, Senator Hughes, you are asking a question about a policy. If your policy position is to fund that, I look forward to Mr Dutton outlining his plan to fund that and which government services, which are parts of Medicare, he's not going to deliver in order to fund that. We are very focused in this budget on ensuring we provide responsible cost of living assistance to Australians. Now, obviously, there is always more that you would do if you could.
Thank you, Senator Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hughes, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, the Albanese government continues to promise energy bill relief for Australians, but as this latest revelation proves, it rarely delivers and most miss out. Isn't it true that the millions of Australians ineligible for this current package also have no hope of ever seeing Labor's promised $275 cut to their bills?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Hughes, in my state of South Australia, under your refusal to act on energy policies, South Australians would have been paying $530 more. Wow. $530 more. Now, I realise you're not a South Australian senator, but I did see that. I did see that figure, and I thought, well, there you go. That's the actual cost to South Australian families of the opposition of the opposition. The no of the coalition, who extraordinarily came in here and voted against lower price relief for Australians at a time where we know, because of 10 years of your policies and because of what is happening with Russia's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine, that energy prices were going up. But you voted against it. South Australians would have been $530 worse off if you had succeeded.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Shoebridge.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Wong in her capacity as Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Minister, with the helpful ending of the quiet diplomacy strategy from both the Prime Minister and opposition leader last week in relation to the ongoing cruel detention of Australian journalist and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, and the increasingly united cross-party call for his detention to end, can you please now state clearly on the record what you are doing to ensure Julian Assange is brought home?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Wong.
Well, I have already, and in fact I saw, it was interesting to me that me repeating what I'd said at quite a number of press conferences somehow was seen as a new thing. I have made it clear, the Prime Minister has made it clear, that enough is enough. We see no further purpose, that we don't believe anything is to be served by Mr Assange's ongoing incarceration. And I know it might suit the Greens to not hear the fact that we have been saying that since we were elected and before, but we have. We have. Now, I'm also pleased that we did have the opportunity, my High Commissioner did have the opportunity to visit Mr Assange in Belmarsh Prison on the 4th of April. It is, of course, the first consular visit to Mr Assange since November 2019, and it was undertaken with his consent. It was an opportunity, obviously, to check on his health and welfare, which is consistent with the assistance we provide to Australians who are detained. We will continue at all levels of government to convey our expectations, certainly about his treatment, and we will continue to express our view, privately and publicly, that this case has dragged on for long enough and should be brought to a close. Now, Senator Shoebridge, as you would know, these are not legal proceedings to which we are a party. I know that there's been some discussions with parliamentary groups today, the parliamentary group today. I hope those were fruitful. We are seeking to do what we can to resolve it, bearing in mind we are not a party to the legal proceedings which are currently unfought.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Shoebridge, first supplementary.
Minister, the question is not what you can't do. The question is what you are doing. Julian Assange has now been held in brutal conditions in Belmarsh prison for over 4 years, with a potential extradition to the US while the potential extradition is considered. You've spoken about our close relationship with the UK and USA before. What are you doing as minister to ensure our good friends let Julian come home?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Senator Wong.
Again, what I would say is, as Minister and as the Prime Minister, we have put our views clearly to the United Kingdom and to the United States. But there's always a non sequitur in your question, and that is, what are we doing to ensure? We cannot ensure. And you might like to yell about that, but just as I cannot ensure, and Senator Payne could not ensure, that people who are dealing with the legal system of another country, well, it's a fact. Now, I do think it's gone on. Well, hang on. I know you want to play politics with this. I want to say this to you. I think it has gone on too long.
Senator Shoebridge.
Yeah, I don't support what he did, but I think this has gone on too long. I do not believe, nor does the Australian government believe, that there is anything to be served by his ongoing incarceration, and that view informs our engagement with the two countries concerned. But we are not a party to the proceedings.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Shoebridge, before I ask you for your second supplementary, I'll mind you not to interject once you've asked your question. So, second supplementary, thank you.
Thursday, 4 May, was World Press Freedom Day, and the Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus on that day tweeted, "The Albanese government believes a strong and independent media is vital to democracy and holding governments to account. Journalists should never face the prospect of being charged or even jailed just for doing their jobs." Do you accept, Minister, that Julian Assange is a journalist and should not be facing persecution for telling the truth and doing his job?
Senator Wong.
I think Australia supports the freedom of the press as an important principle in our democracy, full stop. And in relation to Mr Assange, I would again say we do not believe there is anything served by his ongoing incarceration, and we have put that view.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Polley.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. The Albanese Labor government has committed to invest in infrastructure that is nationally significant and delivers for our communities. How is the government working to deliver an infrastructure pipeline that is sustainable, comprised of nationally significant projects and aligns to market capacity?
Senator Watt.
Thank you, Senator Polley. I really do appreciate that question from Senator Polley, who I know understands the importance of infrastructure to local communities in her state of Tasmania. Before I answer, though, can I also just take the opportunity to acknowledge in the gallery Alice Springs Mayor Matt Patterson. I've met with Mayor Patterson in Alice Springs, as I know many others have, and we welcome you to the chamber. As we all know, the previous government left the infrastructure investment pipeline in a total mess, just like the entire budget that we inherited. And geez, don't they hate being reminded of it. The infrastructure program under the coalition government was full of backed-up projects that were announced without the support of states or territories, poorly scoped, underfunded and couldn't be delivered because there weren't the tradespeople to build them. And why?
Order.
Simply to win votes. The infrastructure program of the coalition government was undeliverable and spiralling out of control, having blown out from 150 projects to almost 800. The previous government got addicted to press releases and neglected the hard work of actually building infrastructure. What do we remember about the last government? All announcement, no delivery. It was a government that made investment decisions on the basis of colour-coded spreadsheets, and even now they still boast about it. One of the things that separates our government from those opposite is that when we make a promise on infrastructure, you can actually believe it, because as many Australians have observed, we now have a government of adults in charge. What a novel suggestion that is. What a change from the last rabble that we had, the Liberal Party unable to run a budget, running the budget into the ground, with the National Party members making wild promises and National Party ministers running around the countryside promising all sorts of infrastructure projects that they didn't fund, didn't have the tradespeople to deliver. The Labor government is going to do a much better job of that, and you'll see a lot more about that tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing the infrastructure program for our country.
Before I come to you, Senator Polley, Senator Hughes, I called you to order twice and you ignored that. I would ask you to Senator Henderson, my apologies, Senator Hughes. Senator Henderson, I called you to order twice and you ignored that. I would ask you to respect the Senate. And my apologies to you again, Senator Hughes. Senator Polley. Senator Polley, first supplementary.
After a decade of waste and rorts, the Albanese government is cleaning up the mess left by the Liberals and Nationals in the infrastructure portfolio. How is the government demonstrating the commitment to nation-building infrastructure and bringing certainty to the infrastructure sector?
Order. Before I call you Senator Watt, I am going to remind senators, particularly on my left, that when the question is being asked, I expect you to be quiet. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you again, Senator Polley. The Albanese government is committed to investing in projects that are truly nationally significant and deliver real benefits to Australians. After a decade of waste and rorts, the Albanese government is getting on with the job of delivering actual projects, not just promises, actual projects that will benefit communities for years to come right across Australia. We're getting on with the job of delivering important nation-building infrastructure like the Bruce Highway upgrades from Cairns to Townsville to Rocky and even all the way down to the outskirts of Brisbane, and the Coranda Range Road in North Queensland as well, along with many others in Senator Polley's home state of Tasmania. To get our infrastructure pipeline back on a stable footing, though, we've already announced a 90-day independent review of the infrastructure investment program that will ensure that we are investing in projects that are truly nationally significant to make sure that freight keeps moving, that people can get home safely and that connections between our cities and our regions are strong.
Senator Polley, second supplementary.
For a decade, the Liberals and Nationals used colour-coded spreadsheets and political motives to determine infrastructure investments. What has the government inherited from the coalition in the infrastructure pipeline, and how will the Albanese government clean up the mess left behind?
Order. Great question. Senator Watt.
Thank you, Senator Polley. And what a mess we did inherit in the infrastructure program. An infrastructure program too full of colour codes in their spreadsheets to actually be delivered, and as I say, having blown out from 150 to almost 800 projects. Let's just remember a couple of the highlights of the Liberal and National Party's infrastructure program. Remember the Inland Rail, which we were promised would cost $9.3 billion, which is now blown out to approximately $31 billion, with the potential for costs to rise even further. How about the Urban Congestion Fund, full of imaginary car parks in marginal seats? Projects that were grossly underfunded and in some cases committed without land even being available. The former Treasurer, no longer with us, committed $260 million to remove a level crossing next to his own electorate without telling the state government that runs the train line. The funding was also hundreds of millions of dollars short of the actual funding required to do the job. We are adults. We're an adult government. We're going to have an infrastructure program that can be delivered rather than mythical.
Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Wong. How much petroleum resource rent tax has been paid by LNG projects to date?
Senator Wong.
Thank you, and thank you to Senator Pocock for the question. This is the advice I have to date, that PRRT revenue predominantly relates to oil and gas produced in Bass Strait, and no offshore LNG project has paid PRRT yet. Most offshore LNG projects are not expected to pay substantial amounts of PRRT before 2030, whilst earning significant revenues from Australia's gas resources. So the Treasury review, so the Gas Transfer Pricing Review, highlighted the shortcomings of the PRRT for the offshore LNG industry and the need to adapt the rules for these types of projects. The measure that is contained in the budget and that the Treasurer has announced is intended to address this problem and will require the offshore LNG industry to pay more tax sooner. It will bring forward PRRT payments from those projects expected to pay, and additional PRRT payments from those projects not expected to pay under current policy settings. So in other words, from those who are currently under current settings likely to return to governments and certain tax receipts, and that will bring that payment forward, but also it will ensure that some projects not under current settings, which would not pay under current settings, would pay some PRRT. The intention is to ensure a return to the Australian community from the gas resources even when there are low prices.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. After company tax that is paid, does the government think that $0 in PRRT is a fair return for Australians? And if it isn't, why are you just bringing forward the date they pay rather than actually ensuring that Australians are paid for our own gas that is being exported or sold back to us at export prices?
Senator Wong.
Well, I'll take that interjection because I think this is one of the problems with the debate here, that there are people in this chamber who seem to believe that the fact that we have a different policy position is because somehow we're corrupt. And I think that's really offensive, actually. It's really offensive because we on this side...
Senator Wong.
Senator Pocock, fair enough.
Please resume your seat. Senator Pocock.
Senator McKim will get his question at some stage. I'd really love an answer to mine. Thank you.
I'll remind the Minister of your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, look, the view that the Treasurer has articulated is this is about ensuring a fairer return to the Australian people from the resources they own. It is also about providing certainty to industry and making sure Australia remains a reliable trade and investment partner. So there are a range of policy objectives which are all, I would argue, in the national interest, that in arriving at this position after substantial consultation that the government has to balance. And we've sought to do that. So I accept that if you were only thinking about one aspect of those, you might come up with a different...
Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Given so many Australians are facing cost of living pressures and feeling increased climate impacts, how does the government justify increasing fossil fuel subsidies and not genuinely reforming the PRRT so that we are at least getting a return from the sale of our gas?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Wong.
Senator Pocock, I'm happy to have a discussion with you about some of those assertions because I don't believe them to be correct. But I accept there's a bit of political rhetoric. This government has been very clear about the importance of acting on climate. We have brought forward an ambitious policy on that. You will see in this budget also our commitment to the transition in our economy. You made a number of assertions there about PRRT, which I don't accept. We do have to. We have reformed this measure because we think that is justified. I've explained to you the various policy objectives that have to be balanced in that, but it is not the only thing we are doing in the energy space. We do as a country have to transition. We do as the country have to reform. We do as a country want to be a renewable energy superpower, and we are committed to ensuring we do all we can to deliver that.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Davey.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. Minister, the National Emergency Management Agency's website claims it has boots on the ground across Australia through the network of regional recovery support officers that help recovery and resilience in communities affected by disasters or drought. There are currently, according to the website, 57 regions throughout Australia with locally based regional support officers, and there is videos supporting the value of the local knowledge. Do you, as Minister, or does the agency have any plans to relocate these locally based staff from regional areas into city centres or centralised hubs?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Davey. I know very well about the great work that our RSOs, as we call them, in the NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, undertake, because I've met very many of them right across the country. In fact, just on Friday, I think it was, I was in Tasmania at AgFest, where I also met some of the terrific RSOs that have been doing a great job, and I'd met them in the floods after Tasmania, as I have in many other places. Now, my view is that we do need to retain a strong regional presence of those RSOs. I know there has been some discussion internally within the National Emergency Management Agency, but the agency and its executive are very clear that my view is, as Minister, is that the RSOs do perform an important role, including in regional areas. They are an important conduit of information back to head office, and that's one of the reasons why I support their ongoing use. Obviously, there are decisions to be made by the National Emergency Management Agency as to how they use their resources, and that work will go on. But as I say, I've made it very clear that on a personal level as Minister, I think that it is important that we retain a regional presence amongst those RSOs. But while I'm on my feet, I might also mention that the entire issue of resourcing of the National Emergency Management Agency has been a difficult one in the run-up to this budget, because this is yet another area of government where we have inherited funding cliffs. And in fact, the former coalition government cared so much about having RSOs and a regional presence and support for our Emergency Management Agency that they were on track to cut funding to the National Emergency Management Agency by around 25 to 30%. That's how much they cared about supporting our RSOs and our agency, and I can assure people that this government takes these issues much more seriously.
Senator Watt, the time has expired. Senator Davey, first supplementary.
Thank you, and I'm very interested that you believe in the need to retain a regional presence. Can you then explain why several of my colleagues have been contacted by RSOs in their regions, including myself, by RSOs who have been told that they will be relocated to city-based centres or centralised hubs within 12 months. Is there any truth in their concerns?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Davey. Well, as I say, my personal view has been communicated very clearly to the National Emergency Management Agency that I think it is vital that we retain a regional presence of these recovery support officers, because that is where many of the disasters that we've seen over the last couple of years has occurred, has been in our regions, and we want to make sure that we do have people on the ground. As I say, there is work to be done by NEMA about how best to allocate its resources, and one of the reasons they've been forced to do this is because of the funding cuts that were on track to happen as a result of the budget that we inherited from the former government. So I do find it a little hard to listen to National Party senators who all of a sudden are very concerned about resourcing for the National Emergency Management Agency when one of their own was the minister who delivered a budget that was going to cut funding to the National Emergency Management Agency by 25 to 30%. We support regional Australians, we support urban Australians going through disasters. We're not about cutting funding like you lot did.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Davies, second supplementary.
So, very briefly, Minister, you have said it's your personal view that RSOs should stay in the regions. Will you be having a conversation with the CEO of NEMA to reflect on him your personal view to ensure that regional support officers stay in the regions and aren't re-centralised hundreds of kilometres away from where they are needed and valued?
Senator Watt.
Well, I've already said in my first answer and my second answer that I've communicated my view about this, and that includes to the Coordinator-General of the National Emergency Management Agency, Mr Brendan Moon, someone we hired with an incredible track record in emergency management to replace another individual called Mr Shane Stone. And Brendan Moon has been doing an outstanding job as the head of the National Emergency Management Agency. Now, unlike the former government—
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. I'm waiting for order on my left. Senator Davey.
Of order. I mean, that was highly disrespectful to a former commissioner, maybe not a member of this parliament, but I think we still need to show respect.
Order. Order. I did not hear any particular comments, so I'm going to ask Senator Watt to continue.
Thank you, President. As I invite you to have a look at the Hansard where I said that Mr Moon replaced another individual by the name of Mr Shane Stone. So I'm not sure what's offensive about that. Is it individual, the name? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, this government has demonstrated from day one that we take the issues around disaster management far more seriously than ever happened under the former government. We actually showed up. We actually turned up and delivered support to people. We actually cooperated with the states rather than had fights with them.
Order
and
on my left.
We are taking
Order.
seriously the needs of funding for the National Emergency Management Agency, unlike a government that was on track to cut funding by 25 to 30%.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. I refer to the government's recently announced retention bonus for ADF personnel that have just completed their return of service obligations or initial mandatory period of service 4 years. I draw the Minister's attention to the numerous bonuses offered by both Liberal and Labor governments over the last 25 years. These include retention bonuses for Army Specialists, bonuses and increased pay for submariners and category retention bonuses for the RAF. Despite all this, the ADF is still struggling to attract and retain personnel. Why will this bonus system work when all others have failed?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Lambie for the question and acknowledge her many years of contribution both in this place and beyond in relation to matters associated with defence, and in particular her deep concern always for members of the ADF, including veterans. She is right to point out that the ADF has, under governments of both political persuasion, not been able to recruit and retain at the level that we seek. She's right. And I don't pretend that there is an easy answer to that. And the government has been seized of this issue. There has been, in the context of, obviously there's been a lot of work on the DSR, as well as AUKUS, and in the context of the budget, we're very focused on trying to work through how it is we might deal with some of these recruitment and retention issues. We note the previous government made some very substantial announcements about increases to the ADF, but we're not on a pathway to deliver it. And we are looking at a range of ways in which we might seek to do that. So I don't come in here, Senator Lambie, and tell you that somehow magically all of those challenges associated with recruitment and retention will be resolved by one policy only. I suspect it won't be. I think it will assist. But I think more needs to be done. And I'd make the broader point that it's not just an issue for the ADF. Obviously, we are under, there's a lot of sectors of the economy where we have a shortage of people willing to work in those, where we have labour shortages. We have a lot of sectors of the economy where skilled staff are hard to both attract and retain.
Thank you, Senator Wong.
And the
Senator
ADF
Lambie. Senator Wong, time for answering has expired. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. This bonus appears to be available only to personnel who have recently completed their return of service obligations or their initial mandatory period of service for 4 years. This means, in a practical sense, this will only be offered to the most junior ranks across the military. This will be a slap in the face to junior leaders like corporals and sergeants and their colleagues in the Navy and the RAF who are attractive employees to civilian organisations. These are the ones you need to retain. Why doesn't the government want to keep these junior leaders in our military?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. The time has expired. Senator Wong.
Thank you. Senator Lambie, in the time while I was seeking to answer your first question, I have been provided with a little more information, and I might provide you with that. As part of this year's budget, the government is announcing funding of an ADF continuation bonus. The advice is that this is critical to influencing career decisions when the member is approaching their first opportunity to make a decision to stay or leave the Australian Defence Force. We obviously have been, as I said, considering a number of the recommendations in the DSR. There were 4 recommendations relating to recruitment and retention, and the government is developing options to respond to each of those 4 recommendations. The bonus that we are discussing was the immediate response to the DSR in order to continue to invest in the growth and retention of a highly skilled defence workforce.
Has expired. Senator Lambie's second supplementary.
Thank you. I'm not sure who's writing the policies, but they got it completely wrong. This bonus is reported to be available to just 3,500 defence personnel out of some 60,000 over 3 years. That's just over 1,000 per year. Defence reported in its 2021-22 annual report that about 11% of its personnel, some 6,500, left the military that year. Why is the government offering a retention bonus to so few of our men and women in the ADF when the problem is so much greater than just a few thousand?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Senator Lambie. I think in my first question I did acknowledge that the problem is greater than the capacity of one measure to respond. And as I said, the DSR did contain a number of recommendations in relation to recruitment and retention. We will work through them, and Defence will provide to government options for them. However, the immediate response was what's been described as a continuation bonus. I'm advised the eligibility for the bonus includes permanency, nearing completion of the initial minimum period of service, having completed or will complete a minimum 4 years of service, agreeing to recommit to 3 years of full-time service, and not already in receipt of another bonus for the same commitment reason. I think the senator's response is why is this continuation bonus narrowly cast? It is for the reasons that I identified in my previous answer.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services, Senator Farrell. Can the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services outline how the Albanese government is delivering on its commitments in the budget to deliver cost of living relief where it can?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator O'Neill for her ongoing interest in pushing down the cost of living, particularly for constituents in her great state of New South Wales. And the centrepiece of the budget we hand down tonight will be a $14.6 billion cost of living relief package that is calibrated in a way that doesn't add to inflation. Our economic plan has 3 parts: relief, repair and restraint. I'll repeat that for Senator Birmingham's benefit: relief, repair and restraint. This includes cost of living relief where it's affordable and responsible, and it also focuses on repairing of our supply chains. We need to show spending restraint to ensure we're getting genuine value for money from investments in our economy and our people, so that we can clean up the mess left behind this lot over here. We've carefully calibrated and designed this budget so that it takes pressure off the cost of living rather than adds to it. This will be a budget in the best of Labor tradition. I'll repeat that. This will be a budget in the best Labor tradition. Help for vulnerable Australians with cost of living pressures, an eye on the future and responsible economic management. Our aim throughout, whether it's cost of living package, our broader investment in energy and other efforts to grow the economy, is to make sure that this budget is part of the solution to high inflation and cost of living pressures, not adding to the problem. It's important that as a government we focus on every policy lever available to us to tackle the pressures that are affecting more Australians' ability to make ends meet.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. Senator O'Neill, first supplementary.
Thank you, Senator Farrell, for that fulsome response, and I'm sure gives hope to the people of Australia. Senator, what measures has the government already taken in the social services portfolio to deliver cost of living relief?
Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President. Once again, thank Senator. Well, I'm trying to be doing that. I'm disappointed you don't think I am, Senator McKenzie. As a government, as a government, of course, we've been delivering on our commitment to address cost of living relief. We're delivering cheaper medicines and childcare. This will make a huge difference to the cost parents face in accessing quality care for their children. We've also announced a $64 million commitment for place-based partnerships to tackle entrenched disadvantage. This will extend to Stronger Places, Stronger People initiative in the existing 10 communities and enhance shared decision-making and local solutions in 6 of these communities. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced changes to the parenting payment single budget measure that will lift both eligibility to parents with children up to 14 years of age and lift the payment value by $176.90.
Senator O'Neill, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. How is the government working to address ongoing concerns about cost of living beyond the immediate budget?
Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator O'Neill for her second supplementary question. This government will make substantial investments through the budget this year to provide cost of living relief and meaningful improvements to services like Medicare and cheaper childcare. And the single parents, we know there are pockets of disadvantage right around Australia and communities where people continue to struggle to get ahead. These measures will provide structural household budget relief once legislated. I remind the Senate that we've also established an expert economic inclusion advisory committee and asked them to give us advice on boosting economic inclusion and tackling disadvantage. And I acknowledge that Senator Pocock, in his advocacy and work alongside the government in establishing this committee. Addressing cost of living pressures is consistent with what we said we would do before the election, what Labor governments always do. When the Liberal National Party talk about cost of living pressures, we know it's been tough because Australians are paying the price.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Wong, and I refer the Minister to the Albanese government's $240 million commitment to a new stadium to be built on Hobart's waterfront. And I ask and refer the Minister to Tasmanian Labor leader Rebecca White's question in Parliament today, the Tasmanian Parliament, about whether the federal government will be excising from GST calculations this commitment from the federal government. Will you, Minister, guarantee that this will not impact on Tasmania's share of the GST?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Thank you. I have learnt a lot from Senator Duniam across the chamber about Tasmanian politics.
Yeah.
Because he's explained to me, and as this question really goes to, that he's from the Tasmanian Liberal Party, but he doesn't support the Tasmanian Liberal government on the stadium, but Labor supports the Tasmanian Liberal government, except Senator Colbeck does support the Tasmanian Liberal government. So it's an interesting situation.
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
So, obviously, President, on relevance, Senator Wong's talking about all sorts of political things, not what matters to Tasmanians, and that's our GST share. It's serious.
Order on my left and right. Senator Duniam, your question did go to a question asked in the state parliament by another party, so I think Senator Wong is entirely within the confines of your question. And if she doesn't get, if she continues to answer the question, if she doesn't, I'll draw her to the question. Thank you. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Senator. What I would say is obviously we are investing in Tasmania, but not only in the stadium, but in health, housing and infrastructure. We are, for example, we announced recently an additional Medicare urgent care clinic, taking the number of Medicare urgent care clinics to be established from in the state to 4. We've provided funding for 2 Shepherd Centres in Tassie, 1 in Hobart and 1 in Launceston, and we're investing in key infrastructure. I don't, unlike Senator Duniam, I'm afraid to say I don't watch the Tasmanian Parliament. Sorry. And I have a lot of regard for Ms White, but I don't know what the question was, but I certainly will take on
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Birmingham.
President, on a point of order, because Senator Duniam wasn't asking Senator Wong to have some sort of powers of knowledge as to what was happening in the Tasmanian Parliament. He referenced that, but he asked a very specific question as to whether the minister would guarantee that the funding of the stadium in Tasmania would not impact on Tasmania's GST share. Minister Wong's representing the Treasurer in this place. It's a question for the Commonwealth Treasurer, quite appropriately, and one that Minister Wong should be able to fairly directly address.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I will draw that part of the question to Senator Wong's attention.
Lecture from Senator Birmingham about directly addressing questions. Anyway, we all remembered. All running a budget. That's true. We all remember that. GST payments, as you know, Senator, are allocated in accordance with a formula, and that there is no change that I understand either the Coalition or the Labor government has proposed to the way in which GST allocations are being made. But I will get what information I can on the specifics of a question asked by a Labor person in the State Parliament of Tasmania.
Thank you, Senator Wong. The time for answering
Senator
has expired. Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Well, health was mentioned in the primary question, so I again refer to Labor's $240 million commitment to a waterfront stadium, and I ask, can the minister guarantee that in tonight's federal budget that it will also be included funding for a desperately needed permanent full-time GP service for Tasmania's Central Highlands community?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Senator Wong.
I thank you. I have already indicated that we've recently announced additional Medicare urgent care clinic for Tasmania, which will take the number established in the state to 4, Devonport, Launceston and 2 in Hobart. I would make the point that it is those of us on this side in government and in opposition which has always supported Medicare, unlike...
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. Just again on relevance, I asked a very specific question, not about urgent care clinics or about Medicare. I asked about GP services specifically for the Tasmanian Central Highlands community, and I haven't had a guarantee yet.
I do think Senator Wong is being relevant, but I will draw her to... Senator Ruston, I would remind you to act respectively and not call out and interject when I am answering a point of order. But I will remind her to the specifics of the Highlands region. Thank you.
Well, actually, I did answer the question because I said, obviously these are. If I'm being asked a question about tonight's budget, the senator will have to wait till the budget is announced. But I would also make the point, and it is.
Order.
I'll hold you to that. I bet you that won't happen. I would make this point. I'm trying to finish the sentence here. The senator raises Medicare. Well, we know who built Medicare. That's right. We know who's always supported Medicare.
Thank you,
we know
Senator
who's
Wong.
failed to fund Medicare.
It's not those. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
President, thank you. No guarantee on GST, no guarantee on GP services for Central Highlands. Can the minister confirm that in last year's Labor budget, $248.6 million was ripped out of Tasmanian road projects, and yet in this year's budget, the government's found $240 million for the Hobart Stadium? Given Labor took money from road projects in a state where we have the worst road death toll in the country to fund a stadium, doesn't this show how out of touch with Tasmania's priorities Labor really is?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Order. Order. Order across the chamber. Order across the chamber. Minister Wong.
Thank you. The advice I have is that as part of the government's 22-23 October projects, 22-23 October budget, no projects in Tasmania were cancelled or had funding reduced. The IIP also provided for more than $230 million over 10 years for smaller...
Senator Wong, sorry, please resume your seat. Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Mackenzie.
Point of order on the advice that Senator Wong...
Senator Mackenzie, that is not a point of
relevance?
The Minister is being relevant. Thank you. Please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
I know the truth hurts sometimes, Senator Mackenzie. The statement that the senator made I don't think is correct. And I would say this, in terms of the needs of Tasmania, I think the assertion that this senator is making is he understands them better than Senator Colbeck and his Liberal Premier. And with that, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you.